Thank you, Ricky. I'm excited to introduce my panelists today, although it's not really fair that we have to follow Dr. Weber. I'm stealing that comment from Khalil, but please welcome the panelists to the stage. We've got Jim McArdle, VP Platform and Technology Regulated Industries at SAP.
I wore the same jacket, so you know who I am. Same outfit, that's my headshot.
We've got Vivian Bouet, Chief Information Officer at CPS Energy, and Khalil Shalabi, Executive VP, Strategic Initiatives and Transformation at LCRA.
Great.
So the name of this panel is Changing Game, Changing Players. So we're going to be talking about the transformation happening in the energy industry and the changes in the workforce that go along with that, and also how you can actually prepare your workforce for change. So let's get right into it. And Vivian and Khalil, I'm going to start with you. Vivian, you can answer first. But my question is, so utilities are sort of all in different areas or different places in their transformation journeys. So what does that really mean for CPS Energy, and what does that mean for preparing your workforce for the changes that come along with transformation?
You know, when we think about utilities, and I think the truth is this, as you think about digital transformation and you think about business transformation that comes along with digital transformation, we're all in different points of our journey. Now, as we are embarking upon that journey, one of the things that we're really thinking about is how we involve and engage all of our employees in that process. Right now at CPS Energy, we're looking at digital transformation as a way to, it is not a technology issue, it is a business issue. It is how we deliver value to our customers. So we're looking at it from a customer-centric perspective, but you can't do customer centricity and leave your employees out of it. You've got to think about how you bring all of your employees. They're the front line, they're touching the customers, they're talking to the customers. And so a big part of what we're doing is making sure that we're getting out and talking to all of those employees. So far, we have 3,000 employees, and I just want to recognize my vice chair from our board, Janie Gonzalez. One of the things that we have been talking about is how do we ensure that we engage all of those employees. We have 3,000 plus employees. So far, for one of our transformations alone, we started in around October. We have already engaged almost 500 of those employees in over 180 workshops. Why? Because they're the folks that have access to the information around how the work happens, what pain points they have, what they hear from the customers. So transformation is business transformation. So while I'm looking about digital transformation, it really is around engaging the workforce and getting them to lean in and leaning in with your messages so that they are the voice of that transformation.
Thanks, Vivian. And I'll probably be saying the same thing for LCRA. What we found a few years ago that the needs of the employees when it comes to technology far outstrip the capability of the folks that have to implement technology. So what ends up happening is you get a lot of requests, you get a lot of needs, and they sort of get thrown over the fence. I need this, and they throw it over to your IT shop, your OT shop, whatever it is. And unless you have some sort of rigorous process, like Vivian is saying, to engage your employees as to their needs, then you're going to be kind of swimming in these spreadsheets, figuring out, oh, here's 200 requests for this year. I can only implement about 12. And you go through some sort of prioritization process, and nobody's happy, and you're spending a lot of money. And if you don't control these costs, technology costs at utility companies grow around 10, 15%. It's probably the fastest growing budget you will have at a utility company if you don't control that cost. So I think part of the process, first, you need a process for how you ask for what the organization wants, and you also need a process to stay ahead of what the organization needs. So those are two separate processes. If you can build what's called an enterprise architecture practice within your utility, you can have those folks sit strategically outside the implementation team and do all this analysis and this engagement for you so that the implementers, first of all, have time to implement, and second of all, they don't have to say no. Because if the implementer has to say, no, I can't do this, I don't have resources, there's always some sort of suspicion around the fact that you just don't want to work hard enough, you don't want to work smart enough, you just didn't plan well enough. But if a strategic group that's outside the implementation group is the one that says no, then they don't have that sort of skin in the game. They're saying no for another reason. For example, how many BI tools do you have? What's the answer? Typically at a utility. All of them, right? So when all of them plus one comes as a request, and it will come, you can say no. The strategic group says no, we have this. This is the corporate BI tool, use it, right? So those are the types of processes you want, and stay ahead of the organization. That's when you engage. That's when you build transparent roadmaps so that if somebody says, I need sort of this AI tool that's very advanced to analyze pictures for defects on transmission lines, it's right here on the roadmap. It's going to be implemented in about 3 years. That's what we predict. May not happen 3 years, but at least we know about it. It follows a few things that have to happen first, and then it's going to be implemented. And those are the things that will give you sort of the comfort to implement technology at a utility company.
You know, the one thing that I would also add is, as you think about the technologies, really, and I was just talking to my vice chair, and we've had multiple conversations with our community, those roadmaps that you're delivering, if you put on, milestone 2, cloud, milestone 3, fiber, milestone 4, insert, technology name, you're going to immediately disengage your audience in terms of what you're trying to deliver. What you should be saying is, milestone 1, a better way for you to order your supplies. Milestone 2, a better way for you to understand what your bills look like. Milestone 3, a better way for you to insert benefit for whoever is engaging. Then all of those people become invested in, people in your transformation, and they're leaning in towards you versus you trying to pull them back in to the fact that you need to make all of this investment. They're now going, we need to make the investment. I'm all in. When do I get it? So part of what we're doing is, I'll say one more thing, is we are putting a video together where it's not me speaking, it's not other leaders, it's the employees, right? It's the customers that will be speaking, and those that will lead with that. They're in the work sessions, they're seeing what the challenges are, and they're speaking, and they're saying, these are the things that we need to do, and this is what's painful, but I'm really excited about this, and they're leaning in and moving forward. So that's the one thing that I would say is about your transformation roadmap. Make it beneficial to the stakeholders you're speaking to, so that they understand so that they can go ahead and invest in the transformation.
Thank you. Jim, do you have thoughts on what Vivian and Khalil just talked about?
I like that Vivian, what she really is explaining is the why, right? And people need to understand that why. You need to engage them, and you need to understand why you're not going to give them the 5th BI tool. It's that very, very common, why are we doing this? And no one really should be doing anything technology-wise unless they truly understand that why and making those investments.
Thank you. Khalil, back down to you. So you sort of brought up this concept on our prep call of a communication matrix within utilities, kind of among field workers and office workers, and then how they communicate with OT and how they communicate with IT. So can you explain what you meant by that, and just how does that sort of affect some of these transformations?
Yeah, sure, Erin. And I think we were discussing that within the context of the pandemic and all the technologies that we had to use during the pandemic, whether in the field or in the office or at home. But we often forget that at utilities, more than half the folks actually don't work in an office, never had the luxury to go home, worked in the field. We're lucky we're a wholesale utility. I mean, our folks went out in the field and worked hard, but if you're a retail utility, you may have had to go into people's homes during the pandemic to read a gas meter or to fix something. But our communications, oftentimes, during that time, maybe were geared more towards sort of, the office worker as opposed to the folks that just had to keep under all these conditions, going out and working in the field under the same conditions. So we talked about a matrix where, you have both IT products and OT products, and the communication around those are different. But you also have the folks that consume technology at a utility are two types of consumers, just to simplify it in two big buckets. The folks that work out in the field, and also the folks that work in the office. So it becomes sort of this four-square matrix of the types of communications that you would have when it comes to technology.
Yeah, and I would add to that 2 points. One of the things that we're doing at CPS Energy with our CEO as the person that's advocating for this is those office workers, right? Get them into the field. Get them talking to your lineman. Get them talking to your journeyman. And so I went out into the field to our East Side Center where we were having a safety day, and we talked to them, like, what's going on? The goal is not to sit there and educate them. They know their job. They've been doing it for years and years and years. This is not an education session. This is hey, we care about what you're doing, and is there anything we can do to support you in your day-to-day work so that we can, ensure that they know that we're there for them. So here's what happened, right? We're having the safety day. We're having the conversation. One of the linemen walks up to me, "You're the tech person, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the tech." I'm kind of scared now, right? I'm the tech person, right? And he says, "Well, you know that GIS problem? We have a GIS problem, and I want to talk to you about it." I pulled out my camera. We looked at it, and we have already taken the problem that has been there for some time. We have deployed a team, we have solved it, and we have one more initiative in the future to deal with some of the longer-term implications. That kind of engagement is where you get them to really understand that you're there for them, right? So all of them. We have on our calendars, I think on the entire executive team, we're out in the field at least 8 times this year and more as warranted. The second point I would make, and I just recently had a conversation, is making sure you have your personas of engagement, right? So we have the field workers, we have what we call our energy advisors. They're the ones taking the calls, right? When we had Winter Storm Uri, guess who was taking that call? If you're not sitting in the call center with them to really understand what their pain points are, got a different kind of problem. You still want to engage your office workers, but that executive team, you've got to get them out in the field, listening, understanding what the pain points are, and then responding and closing that loop.
Can I add an
Yes.
anecdote to this? We did a big sort of improvement project for our big enterprise system, and we're starting to get complaints about ordering parts all of a sudden. They were like, it's just a lot harder to order parts. And actually, as part of the engagement on technology, Christina was sitting here in the audience. She went out and videotaped somebody on the system ordering parts, and it was like 22 steps to order a part. And she brought it back to the project team. This is what you did to them. This is what your technology improvement did to this person, right? And showed them the video. And that's damning evidence just from that engagement. And then they had to put in a whole bunch of new improvements. So that went back to whatever steps it used to be.
Jim, what has changed for you over the course of the pandemic when it comes to sort of delivering transformation projects for your customers?
Yes. So we deliver large digital transformation as well as ERP back-end customer systems. And I think one of the biggest changes is if Vivian would have come and said, I'm going to deliver a digital transformation. We're going to do it all remote. We're going to do all of our workshops remote. We're going to have all of our consultants remote. We're going to deploy to the cloud, and we're not going to be in a single room together. 3 years ago, you probably wouldn't have your CIO job, right? Now, all of us have experienced delivering these projects that way, right? There have been lower costs. We haven't needed as many consultants on site. We haven't needed as large a project team sequestered in a conference room. We've been able to accomplish massive things in a way that was never really imagined in the past, or was an outlier in the past as far as the delivery model. Now, that being said, there are some downsides that have been identified over the past 2 years about not being face-to-face, not being in workshops together, not being truly, able to understand the nuances in certain change management that needs to happen when you go through a transformational project. But in general, everyone has realized that the fundamental paradigm has changed and that these things can be done. Now, whether they are the right way to deliver your transformation, that's unknown. You need to make sure that you decide that based on your corporate culture, the impact of it, and what you need to do. The other big change is that a lot of the projects that you do need to produce value in the short term. So even when you're doing an ERP or a customer billing solution in any major technology, there needs to be a value that is not 2 years from now with a big bang go live. There needs to be incremental change that you show to your end employees, that you show to your end customers, that delivers that value all along the life cycle. That also then tries to get it to be self-funding, right? So I think that those are probably the two biggest changes, and a lot of that was, I think, the lack of a big bang and then the transition to value in shorter increments was happening before the pandemic, but that delivery model, I think, really is the biggest change that we're seeing across the industry and across not just SAP, but everybody in the industry.
Right, so we're talking about technology here, but we have to remember the human element behind the technology. So Khalil, when we kind of discuss some of the goods and evils when it comes to technology, how do you approach, using technology appropriately, and especially as it seems like this hybrid model is here to stay?
Yeah, and I think we were, again, talking in the context of the pandemic and remote work. And I think there was a previous panel that talked a little bit about that and how their engagement scores kind of went up when everybody went home, and I think everybody had the same experience. I think as an industry, we're incredibly lucky that the whole kind of video chat thing was ironed out before the pandemic came around. I think that was a Bill Gates conspiracy. That's a true conspiracy. He knew the pandemic was coming, so he had Teams all set up because he was going to make a lot of money on Teams. Anyway. But yeah, I think I hear the same story over and over. We sent everybody home on a Friday, right? And Monday, everybody logged on, everything worked out pretty well, right? Maybe some issues, we ironed them out, we had some tiger teams, and everything went well. But I think after a year of people being on video, we saw a lot of downsides. You'll probably talk about the 20 minutes and the 50 minutes, the rule that CPS came up with, which is brilliant. But after what we've done at LCRA, when it comes to remote work and hybrid work and all that stuff, we've done two things. One is we've been very flexible as to our plans. We haven't put anything to this day, and right now we're at 2 days in the office for non-essential workers, but we're not promising it's going to be like that forever, right? But right now it's working out great. Our engagement scores actually went up from it 2 years ago, and people kind of like the hybrid model. You come in for a couple of days. In my group, Thursday is sort of our anchor day where we have all our meetings, so everybody sees each other, and then they have the flexibility to pick kind of what the other day is. We don't believe in a utility with our culture that fully remote for a big portion of our employees works, especially when half our workers are actually in the field and working. The other thing that we've done is we've promised to give them a big heads up for a change, right? So if we are going to change, we give it a lot of runway. We don't change in a week or whatnot, other than the initial everybody go home. I think with the 2 days a week, having some in-person meetings, having some rules around technology, we're in the sweet spot of the efficiency of Teams meetings and Zoom meetings vis-a-vis being able to see people in person, and meeting with them and having sort of that human contact. Because I think that first year, I was done with I don't know if everybody remembers the Zoom happy hours, right? I mean, those are so popular. I bet you nobody will ever get on a Zoom happy hour ever again. Because who wants to be on video, after being at work on video all day long? So, so I think we're at the sweet spot right now, and a lot of companies are sort of figuring it out.
Yeah, and as part of the, figuring it out, one of the things is just allowing your workforce to tell you what it is that works best. So we have some flexibility. A couple of things that we also notice through this process, and I would say that the end result is that we've become a lot more gracious with each other. One example was earlier on in the pandemic. We had a parent who was on a meeting, and kids were home. If you remember, kids were all home, and the parent was in the closet, like, I have to be in a meeting, right? And telling and what we were hearing, we all on the call was like, Daddy, I'm hungry, stuff like that, and we all said, okay, stop the meeting, go feed your child, and then we'll come back. All right? And so it was things like that where we said, okay, as a result, and this is what you were just referring to, we instituted the following things. Meetings, 30-minute meetings, only 20 minutes, to allow for you to have that 10-minute break in between, because what was also happening was back-to-back meetings, and then you start at 7 o'clock in the morning, at 6 o'clock you're still sitting in the same spot, maybe not, maybe a little bit stiffer for that. So some of the challenges were just making sure that we had meetings that were 20 minutes, 10-minute break, or 50 minutes if it's an hour meeting, so you can have a break in between. And then we locked down the lunch hour. No meetings company-wide from 11:30 to 12:30 that allows everyone, because if only one department does it, here's what happens. Then, someone else from another department will schedule some meeting, and then you still don't have the lunchtime. So company-wide, protect the lunchtime, allow people to do that. So those good things still happen today at CPS Energy. The other thing that I would say is, but there are times when we're saying, hey, we need to solve several problems, and the raise your hand function ain't working for me, because I want to just have conversations, see body language, and have this dynamic conversation with the team. And so we're in the office workshopping on the wall with sticky notes, etc. So there are times, to the point of technology, there are times when it's very helpful, but there are times when it can get in your way of your progress. And if you need to move faster, sometimes a different model works for you, and you're in the office and finding ways that work for you in that model.
Vivian, did you want to talk about, you talked about safety meetings at CPS and technology, that there was a benefit to that?
Yeah, so we were having, so one of the things that folks may think is, hey, maybe our frontline force would not be on a Teams meeting. We had Teams meeting with 300-400 people talking and doing safety days at the height of the pandemic. So there's ways where the way we used to work is past. The way we're working in the future is very different today. And don't create, I would caution, don't create assumptions about what different sorts of your workforce will do and how they work, right? Instead, introduce it, let them engage with it, and then you will see what will naturally happen, and let them organically define what they want to do. So I would say don't box people in. Introduce the tools and let the forces be that works for them happen.
And I guess I can talk just from the technology, the platform. We see two big changes. One of them, it's not really a technology, but it is that flexible environment, right? It's got to be a mandate for technology in the future, is flexibility has to be paramount, as one of the biggest requirements, and one of the key business drivers. And then the second is something that we expect to totally transform kind of the industry. And it's not an SAP statement, it's the pervasiveness of 5G in the network. So that, think about it, when you used to download a movie, it used to take 4 hours. And then for 3G, it went to an hour. And now we're going to get to 5G pervasive everywhere, and then next generation networking that's going to take that down to 2 minutes to download that HD movie. So if you think about what that's going to allow you to do, not only with Teams, and I can't wait to talk about the Bill Gates conspiracy theory a little later, that's going to be fun, but think about what that's going to do to the workforce of the future with receiving, whether it's a drone, live video on your phone, right? That's not that far off. It can be done now, and it's basically going to be enabled through a very high-speed wireless network. Now, didn't want to talk about there will be inequities in which communities this reaches, what industries this serves, but that is a foundational building block, I think, from a platform that all of us can acknowledge. It's going to be a game changer going forward. You know.
Well, I'm glad Khalil's not a 5G conspiracy theorist.
Not yet.
And Vivian, Zpryme does a lot of work and projects with CPS, and we definitely appreciated that meetings ending at the 50-minute mark so we could have 10 minutes to regroup. And we actually took that and started to sort of implement it on our own meetings as well. So we've been kind of talking about the office worker perspective with the virtual meetings and everything, but field workers' jobs and the way they do them are changing as well. So Jim, can you talk a little bit about how technologies can help those employees?
Yeah, so we've all had field workers that have been either disconnected or connected through trucks or through devices. Again, back to the platform conversation about 5G, that will fundamentally change how connected we are in a field service environment, how we collect data from the field service, how we collect device data from fields, how we collect OT information from networks. I think that will then fundamentally change what people are being deployed in the field to do, how we make it safer, and how we make it more impactful for the customers that we serve, and the employees that need to go out and work, whether it's a safety or a customer service initiative. That is something that we have not had the ability to do in the past. We are starting to get there right now, and that's kind of one of our big missions is how are we going to get that platform, and that will be enabled through the network, right? And that is how we are architecting our future state for our utility solutions, and it is how the whole entire, believe, industry is going. So if you're not leveraging that in your environments, I'd actually have just somewhat of a little bit of a plan to say, okay, when that comes, what does that mean to our environments?
So as these jobs are kind of changing and technologies decreases the need for certain skills and increases the need for other skills, Vivian, maybe you can start. How is your organization approaching upskilling and training your workforce?
We're doing it in phases as we think about our transformation, and we're beginning to think about how we do that. Right now, for instance, we are in the middle of an ERP transformation. One of the things that we're thinking about through that process, so our system that we've had has been out there since 1998. I'll pause for effect. Okay. So as we think about, these are, developers, people, that have been working, the entire organization that has been engaging with a system that, is pretty, quite frankly, outdated. And so what we're thinking, so what we're creating is a process in which we will go through the most essential people that need to move from our current system to the new system. They will go through an upskilling and reskilling process, and then they will move in. What will happen then is the next line behind that person will now need to move up. They'll stay with the current system, but then eventually you'll get to the back of that line and you'll say, am I replacing that with a new employee? No, what we're gonna do for now until we get the new technology in is we use staff augmentation. And so that's how we're doing is this a phase upskill. And every single one of them is the conversation with them, because the employees really want to know, do I have a job with all of this change? And are you going to ultimately get rid of me? And we're saying absolutely not. Our goal right now is to ensure that as we go through the transformation, that you'll have a pathway to transform with us and inform that. And guess what? That knowledge that you have about our organization is incredibly valuable. And we want to keep and retain that. And so that's one way to engage them. So we're using a phased approach to do that. There will be places where we need to do major parts of that, but that's within technology. Now think about the businesses that are impacted. If you have very manual processes, as an example, it may take you 10 people to close your financial books. Maybe with the new system, you only need 2 people. So what do you do with the remaining 8 people, right? And you say to yourself, well, there's now information and analytics that is coming out that we never had before. How can you now upskill them to better use that, to better inform investments we're making, value we're providing to the customers, et cetera. So there's a way to make sure that your entire workforce, or the majority of them, can stay with you through your transformation.
Khalil, what about LCRA?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a shame if we were to lose an employee because of skill obsolescence. It is just so hard to recruit people these days. And to lose them because of such a reason, skill obsolescence, I think would be a real shame. One of our strategic initiatives is a learning and development initiative. We have 10 strategic initiatives, and 2 of them are focused on people. One of them is learning and development, and part of that is figuring out skills and upskilling and how we retain people and how we recruit people. I guess one advantage when it comes to skill obsolescence is the utility industry really doesn't have a lot of people sort of mid-career. We hired a lot of people in the 80s and the 90s. We locked them up with pensions. We kept them around, and then we didn't really hire anybody. And now these folks are at the end of their career. They're kind of retiring. So we have sort of the luxury to bring in folks out of school that know a lot about the new technologies that we're having. So we're, I think, in a good spot from that perspective, but in those sort of unique circumstances where somebody's skill is obsolete, we need to identify that, and we do need to retrain them. And there's a lot of opportunity. The nice thing about a utility is there are a lot of different types of jobs, and there are a lot of really interesting jobs out there for folks to do.
If you think about the folks that are keeping the lights on a day-to-day basis, I know that for CPS Energy, our numbers look as follows. We're 30% of our workforce approximately over the next 5 years will be retiring. Right? And that's a big portion of your workforce. And you're in a market that is changing, the technology is changing, what people value is changing in terms of compensation. So those are all things that you should be considering as you think through your transformation as well.
I've got one more question for the panel, but do we have any audience questions? There's one right there. You might have to just yell it out. I don't know if we have a mic.
Thank you. So thank you for being up there. But Vivian, I thought a lot of what you said really resonated with me. 3 particular points. First of all, here you are, the CIO of CPS, and you rarely spoke about technology. 3 things that really stood out. You talked about your end customer, your internal customers, and your employees. So just a couple of stories that I think support what you talked about here today. So one, I was working with a very big, large utility here in Texas, and I remember they were doing a customer transformation. And we were sitting in one of the trainings, just listening in for one of the call center employees, all of the whole call center, and they had just done a full transformation, and it was a year long, and they included these employees in all of the decision making in the marketing throughout the organization, and really made them feel a part of the program. And at the end of it, they actually stood up and gave a standing ovation to that whole project team, at the end of the transformation. And I think that's really saying something. And then the second story I wanted to give on the last point that you made around family and being empathetic to people's time and what they're going through at home is at the beginning of the pandemic, my daughter, she's 13, we moved her from upstairs because they were doing everything remote. We transformed our dining room into her office, and it was right beside my office. And at 11 o'clock every day, she had music class, and she was playing the clarinet. And she'd be playing the clarinet, and I'd be on a standing meeting, of course, with my CIOs, you know, for one of the projects we had going on. And, you know, I'd put it on mute, and she'd start, and it was horrible. I mean, she was squeaking throughout the whole thing. They'd ask me a question, I'd take it off, and it would, of course, echo throughout the Teams call, and then I'd put it on mute. And I said to myself, you know, I don't want to mute her. I want her to do her thing. We're just going to have to suck it up. So throughout the end, as we got towards the end of this project, she got better. And I remember, you know, my customers getting on and saying to me, Jasmine's improved. Like, they knew her name. And they were like in it. You know, they were like, she's gotten a lot better, da da da. And they actually started sending me photos of clarinets they had, of their kids' clarinets. And I showed it to my daughter, and she was super pumped. And then at the end of it, I brought her on camera, introduced her to everyone, and they were super, you know, pumped about that. So I agree with you. You know, technology has changed, but I think the human element has changed more than anything. So,
What a wonderful story.
I was a last-minute fill-in. Jermaine was supposed to be up here. He's way more dynamic than me.
So my last question is about any technologies that you've seen to help on the operational side of or within a utility. Do you have any examples of technologies, cool technologies you've seen that have been helping the operation side?
I want to go into the multiverse, but I'll leave that to Mark Zuckerberg. So one of the things in terms of is really talking about machine learning and having that apply to how we can invest in things from rudimentary things, not rudimentary, but day-to-day things like vegetation management, all the way to understanding how, as we look at weather pattern changes, and as we tie the weather pattern changes to where we see system outages, put those two together and see if we can predict when a new weather system is coming in, where you might have your most likely outages and deploy your teams out there. So having the machines learn that, and we had to give it algorithm time to learn, and these are ways of deploying, taking practical applications to some really cool tech in your utility today. So this is one example of where we're using this advanced analytics space and applying that.
Yeah, a couple of places that we're engaged in. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about trading in the electric market. Long-term weather forecasts are becoming more and more important to figure out what your hedging strategy is going to be. And, you know, a lot of trading groups, they subscribe to commercial weather services that give you some of these forecasts. But we've been engaging some universities that are doing some pretty innovative research around some of those predictions and a different way to look at those models. What we want to know is what's the wind going to be in a month, what's solar going to be in a month from now, heating degree days over the next 2 years, cooling degree days over the next 2 years, and that's going to inform our sort of hedging strategy. So that's one area that we're playing with, and you know, it has a huge impact. I mean, the one place where utility can really lose their shirt, especially one that's integrated like a municipality or an authority or a co-op where they own generation, is in the ERCOT market. Another place where Jim talked about is out in the field in transmission and some in distribution is sort of the stacking of technologies and sort of having that underlying communication platform, whether it's 5G or not, but having that basis, and then you start stacking things on top of each other. Like you do drone inspections, then you have a lot of images, then you collaborate with EPRI, for example, on an AI program, machine learning program that identifies the defects from those pictures, so you don't have somebody flipping through pictures from a drone to see where the defects are. So it's sort of that stacking of technologies out in the field.
Yeah, and one of the good things that you've both mentioned earlier is starting the technology where your teams are, right? It's starting there and then that build process. You don't want to do a moonshot with an AI project where there's so many valuable things that you can do in an incremental step with machine learning that provides value across the organization. And that is really where I think, we recommend is start where you are, right? Start where you are on the digital transformation, machine learning, AI, all of the technology advancements, which is great. So.
Well, thank you all so much. It's been great to hear about the exciting things that you're working on, and I hope we can continue our conversation at the networking reception later on today. But please join me in thanking our panelists, and we will see you all soon.